Hello my friends, here we are back for a replay of one of the most classic advanced squad leader scenarios, the Tractor Works, where elite, first-class German forces are locked in an intense fight against first-class, fanatical Soviet units for possession of the strategic Dzerhezinsky Tractor Works in early October 1942 in Stalingrad. The situation, which was not good in the first turn, got much worse in the second turn, with the almost total decimation of the units besieged in the tractor factory, while the units of the 295th Rifle Division that were supposed to try to rescue them were unable to break through the barrier created by units of Kampfgruppenstaller. The idea of surrender was even considered, but the weight of Stavka's Executive Order 227, not a step behind, caused the Soviet units to continue their Herculean efforts to overcome this critical phase of the battle. The German forces, on the other hand, are extremely optimistic, as they have already penetrated the factory precincts in force, where they encounter weak resistance. General Paulus, commander of the German Sixth Army, is already receiving praise from far, and we await good news soon. With this back turn, we will enter the Soviet phase of the third turn of the battle. Enjoy! Before starting the rally phase, let's resolve an issue from the previous turn, which left the possibility of activating the Soviet and German snipers. The German sniper is not activated and, as if it were a possible and desired premonition for the Soviets, the minor sniper is activated. Let's use the roll of 2 dice to check where the Soviet sniper attack will occur. We are using the white dice as the direction and the colored dice as the distance indicator. Another mistake, for a change, and Jim, instead of attacking the German sniper 4 hexes away, attacks the stack in 1s5. The random choice falls on the German squad in 1s5, which is pinged. Let's try rallying Soviet units on the lower floor of 1r1 with modifiers of -1 for the building, -1 for the leader. The 2 Soviet squads regain their morale. The attempt to restore machine gun operation in 1s1 fails. Attempt auto rally in 1t0, no modifiers, +1 for auto rally, -1 for woods protection. With a result of 7, the unit recovers morale. An attempt to recover the unit in 1p3 was carried out successfully, with excellent results for the Soviets at the beginning of the third turn. Let's test our luck by trying the Soviet factory leader auto rally without modifiers, which is vital to maintaining some hope for the beleaguered Soviets in the sector. The modifiers will be +4 for the DM marker, -1 for the factory, +1 for the auto rally. 6 + 4 is 10, and the Soviet leader recovers his morale, as the morale of the Soviet units in the factory is increased by 1 because they are fanatical. And, completing a cycle of good news, unfortunately, the Soviet squad in the hex next to the leader fails its morale test. The DM marker remains on this unit due to the existence of German units in good order in the adjacent hex. The Germans in 1AA2 will try to restore the squad with modifiers of +4 for the DM marker, -1 for the building. The Germans fail and the DM marker is removed. Y7, with modifiers of +4 for the DM marker, -2 for the leader, -1 for the building. The German squad has its morale restored. 1AA7, with the modifiers of -1 for the leader, -1 for the building, and morale is restored. Attempt to recover the function of the machine guns in 1T2. Which was a failure. Prep fire phase. Attack of 1x3, with 4 firepower, doubled to 8 due to the shot being at point blank fire, +1 for the factory. And it is an immeasurable miss. Movement phase. The Soviet units of the 295th Rifle Division decide to carry out a desperate attack, using the human wave against the German units on the upper floor of Hex 1T2. This maneuver requires the presence of a leader and at least 6 Soviet squads, distributed over 3 contiguous hexes, at least 8 hexes from the enemy unit, with at least one of the units with direct vision of the target. Units in human wave have their morale increased by 1 level, do not suffer the effect of the pin, and are entitled to 8 movement factors. These units moved in the form of impulses, with all Soviet units moving 1 hex towards the enemy. After each impulse, the Germans will be able to carry out their defensive fire. 2 squads, accompanied by the leader 9-1 in 1R1 move to 1S2 with the expense of 1 movement factor, MF. 3 squads, in 1S1 for 1T1, with the expense of 1 MF. 2 squads, in 1T0, for 1U1, with the expense of 1 MF, with the end of the first impulse. The Germans make use of their prerogative and fire the first shot from the upper floor in 1S5 over the Soviets, in 1S2, with 16 firepower, -2 for the German leader, -1 for movement in open terrain, -1 for non-assault movement. (7-4 is 3. The machine guns maintain their rate of fire. And what happens is 1 kill in action, where one of the Soviet units, chosen at random, will be eliminated, while the remaining ones will have their morale broken. Once again, Jim makes a mistake and does not use the modifiers in this attack and considers the attack to be a 2 morale check. All Soviet units pass the morale check. New fire, using the rate of fire of machine guns. This shot is illegal, as the Soviet units only use 1 MF to move, and therefore they can only be subject to 1 shot from the units in 1S5, which has already been fired. This shot will be with 12 firepower, -4, as a modifier. 3-4 is -1, which implies 3 kill in action, with the elimination of all Soviet units, with the machine guns maintaining the rate of fire. German units, on the upper and lower floors, in 1T2 fire a shot with 8 firepower, doubled to 16, as it is an adjacent hex shot, at point-blank fire, with modifiers of -1 for movement, in open terrain, -1 for fur non-assault movement. Eight -2 equals 6, which is 2 morale check. The first squad has its morale broken. The second squad also breaks above the ELR, and should have its quality reduced. And the third squad also breaks. Subsequent first fire from 1T2 on the Soviets at 1U1, with 4 firepower -2. Which is a miss. Units in 1v2 attack 1U2, with 4 firepower, -1 for the leader, -1 for non-assault movement, -1 for movement in open terrain. 8 -3 is 5. The German unit does not present the cover, as this shot is supervised by the German leader. 1 morale check. 8 + 1 is 9, and the first squad has its morale broken. And the second squad passes and can progress in the human wave, moving to 1U2, with the expenditure of 2 MF, accumulating the total expenditure of 3 movement factors, so far. The Germans do not use their final protective fire prerogative, to which they are entitled due to the risk of having their morale broken by this shot. The Soviets advance to 1T2 and penetrate the hex with the German unit posted there, where they finally suffer final protective fire, with 4 firepower, reduced to 2 due to it being final protective fire, tripled by the shot coming from the same hex, with a total of 6 firepower. The modifiers will be +3 for the building, -1 for non-assault movement. 3 + 2 is 5. The German unit retains its morale, and it is 1 morale check that the Soviet unit goes through very little, as it has its morale raised to 8. Thus, we end this human wave with a poor result. Continuing the movement phase. One R4 for 1 S4 in assault movement. Fire from the unit on the lower floor of 1 S5, with a total of 8 firepower, +2 for the building. 5 + 2 equals 7, which is 1 morale check. (11 + 1 is 12), and the Soviet unit breaks above the ELR and is reduced in quality to conscript. Half squad from 1P3 to 1R4 in assault movement. 1R3 in assault movement for 1R4, where a subsequent defensive fire from the unit on the lower floor of 1S5. 2 firepower, doubled to 4 firepower, by point-blank firing -1. 3 -1 equals 2, which is AK, casualty reduction, and 2 morale check, where this unit is reduced to half squad and will suffer a 2 morale check. 11 plus 2 equals 13, and this unit breaks above the ELR, and they are reduced to conscripts. One Q5 to 1 R4, assault movement. One P3, stacking with the leader for 1 R5 in assault movement. These units receive a shot of 10 firepower from the machine guns that had maintained the rate of fire. This shot should not have been carried out, as these machine guns had fired the first defensive fire with the cover arc, CA, at the limit between 1S4 and S5. The subsequent first fire could only occur in this CA, often, due to the complexity of the various rules competing in the same event. We only notice basic errors during the video editing. Jim makes a better assessment and does not take this shot. One T7 for 1 U8 in assault movement. The leader 9-2 to 1 X2 to 1 U2, abandoning the factory precincts to the enemies. Oops, we just verified that the Berserk half squad in 1X3 should have been the first unit to move in the Soviet movement phase. Another regrettable mistake. 1V4 for 1 U4 in assault movement, where it receives a first defensive fire from the upper floor 1T4 with 8 firepower, -1 for movement in open terrain. As this Soviet squad moved into the line of sight of the German unit, it lost the concealment marker. (7-1 is 6, which is 1 morale check. And, as usual, the Soviet squad breaks down. New fire, now with 4 firepower, -1. Pin test check that has no effect as the Soviet squad is already broken. 1R1 for 1S3 in assault movement. Lower floor from 1S1 to 1R3. Upper floor from 1S1 to 1R2. Defensive fire phase. Only now, belatedly, does Jim remember the Berserk half squad in Hex 1X3, which moves to 1Y3, where it suffers a massive attack from German units in that hex with 36 firepower, +1 for the factory, -1 for the non-assault movement. And 1 more Soviet unit is eliminated. Finally, we can move to the defensive fire phase. Units 1Y4 and Y5 form a fire group, along with the subsequent defensive fire at 1Y3 and fire with a massive 36 firepower, +1 for the hindrance at 1X4, +1 for the factory. (5 + 2 is 7, which is K/2, with the squad becoming a half squad and then having its morale broken, with the miss of the last Soviet unit, with its morale intact until then, passing German rule to be total over the sector. Let's move on to the advancing fire phase, after removing the defensive fire markers. The stack at 1R5 fires, at the Germans, on the upper deck of 1S5. These units have the assault fire property, and each unit will fire with 4 firepower, for a total of 12 firepower, doubled to 24 firepower and the +3 modifier, for the building. Eight plus 3 is 11, 1 morale check, which Jim doesn't perform due to yet another heinous mistake against the Soviets. Fire group in Hex 1R2 and S3, with 16 firepower, on the upper floor of 1T2. (12) which is a death knell, for the Soviets' intentions, with a miss and simultaneously, with one of the machine guns broken. Route phase. One T1, for 1S1. 1U1 to 1S1 via 1T0. One S4 to 1S3 in low crawl. Low crawl is a maneuver where the unit moves, using all its movement factors, to move one hex, thus avoiding interdiction fires from enemy units, in good order and not in close combat, with line of sight on these units, which in this case, are the German units, at 1T2 and 1S5. 1R4, for 1Q3. 1x2 to 1x1 in low crawl. The squad in Hex 1U4 is eliminated, because it has no possibility of moving to any hex that is not adjacent to an enemy unit, in good order, in an adjacent hex, or towards enemy units, in good order, which are in line of sight of the Soviets. The half squad in 1x3 is eliminated, by the same factors. The same situation occurs with the squad in 1U4. The Germans do not have any units under the DM marker, and we will move on to the advance phase. One S3 to 1T2, entering close combat. 1R4, for 1S4. The leader in 1R5 to 1Q5. The 3 squads in 1R5 to 1S5, entering close combat. The units under the concealment marker in 1U8 to V7. The other squad for 1T7. Close combat. Let's start with the hex at 1S5, evaluating the possibility of an ambush. The ambush does not occur. The Soviets will attack with 15 firepower, against the Germans' 4 firepower. The ratio will be 3 to 1 and the Soviets will need at least 8 to affect the Germans. The Germans will attack one of the Soviet units, with 4 firepower, in a ratio of 1 to 2, needing at least 4 to affect the Soviet squad. Starting with the Soviets, with the result of 4 we already know, that the German squad will be the first German squad to be eliminated in this fight. As the ambush did not occur, this close combat occurs simultaneously and not sequentially. Therefore, the Germans will carry out their attack. 4. And the Soviet unit undergoes a casualty reduction, becoming a half squad, ending the close combat in 1s5. Let's go to Hex 1T2, where the possibility of an ambush does not exist. A Soviet unit had already penetrated this hex in the movement phase during the human wave. The Soviets will attack with 12 firepower against 4 of the Germans, with a ratio of 1 to 3, needing at least 6 to affect the Germans. The Germans will attack the Soviet half squad, with a ratio of 2 to 1, needing at least 7 to affect the enemy. 8. And the German squad is reduced to half squad. The German shot has a result of 3 and the Soviet half squad is eliminated. And these units stay in melee. At this moment, despite Stavka Resolution 227, not a step back, the Soviets, who have already lost 17 squads and the main of their 3 leaders, concede victory to the enemy, who obtains a crushing victory for the Germans. This outcome was not what occurred in the original clash, in which German and Soviet attacks began at almost the same time, and the entire area erupted into bloody street fighting. Using overwhelming numbers, the Soviets overran the tense German defenders, but at such a high cost that, by the time they reached the tractor factory, the value of their reinforcement had greatly diminished. The German assault engineers, meanwhile, had done their job and another section of the factory was evacuated, but they too suffered heavy casualties and their attack quickly failed in the face of a stubborn group of Russians still holding out in one section of the factory. The overall result was that the Russians had recaptured a few city blocks, but were still being slowly eroded into the factory complex. Neither side, despite desperate efforts, casualties mounted, was able to achieve a decisive result that day. In essence, it was a draw, with both sides pouring new troops into the same blocks, where many more men would die in the following days. With this, we end this battle, where the result of the dice, along with some mistakes made by Jim, absolutely favored the German units. Jim says see you soon, for another battle, in which he will delve deeper into the Pacific Theater of Operations of Starter Kit 4, where Japanese troops will clash with Australian units. Namaste.